Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fireside Chat, Codurance Fireside Chat. This is number 52. And for those of you that are new, this is just a bunch of colleagues talking about the industry, software development industry, and all sorts of things. Is conversations that we used to have after work, and now we do them here with you,
We
so that
still
everyone
do
can
we still do that afterwards. We just record.
exactly. You're just recording it for, I don't know, for your entertainment. Let's put it like that. So if you're new, remember to subscribe, hit the notification button if you like what you see, and put forward all the topics that we can discuss. And today we are going to be talking about AI. So how will AI change software development? And this comes because in the last few months, with ChatGPT coming out, and before that, Copilot, and before that, there's been a couple of um, intents not to bring AI into aiding software development. Um, and in the last year, I would say that the advance has been huge, which begs the question: how do we see the future of that? Evolving, right? Like how is it already affecting the way that we do things and so on? And it's interesting because before we had this, we choose this topic, which we did, I don't know, yesterday, I think, or something like that. Most of us were not very familiar with some of the stuff, though, or let's say the state of the art for some of the things. So it was interesting, watching some of the videos to see how things have evolved, what is happening, what is it capable of, and so on. And as always, we have Mash and Sandro here as well to discuss that. So let's start as always now with a bit of a definition. Yeah. What do we mean by no?
I'd like to
AI?
point I'd like to point out that you are the resident expert on AI and Chat GPT. We are just
Because
here
I've
to
used
learn.
it.
We are here to
uh,
learn.
no, but seriously, what do we mean by AI aided, let's say, programming? No, or yeah, what comes to mind? Let's say when you think of
Well, the way I see it is that in the old, and this actually reminds me a little of when I was studying at university. You would install Emacs, and part of Emacs, I forgot the name of there was it had a name, but it played a trick. You could ask it questions that it would answer for you, and everyone, even at that time, was thinking, is it AI or not AI, right? And in that case, it wasn't. It was actually a very simple kind of knowledge base that would allow you, kind of, given certain questions, it will ask questions using your answers, give answers using your question. But the way I see AI, and I guess we are talking about machine learning in particular, and given that we have so much data available on the net, that create you can train algorithms to know everything, or build its knowledge base or its kind of decision models from all the data that's available on the internet, or open, that is open to everybody, right? And then based on that, be able to answer questions. So to train a model and then be able to answer questions that anyone can pose, right? So from a AI aided programming, is then it's a much more customizable and much more interactive code generation tool than what we've seen. So it's something that helps you uh, create code in an interactive way, or generate code in an interactive way. So that's how I would see AI aided programming, basically.
Yeah, in a much more simplistic way, given that I don't understand much about the topic. But from everything that I've seen from Chat GPT, and mainly like the GitHub Copilot, is So AI aided programming is more like you express what you want, and then it generates the code for you. So given like the learnings that the tool has, like analyzing loads and loads of either source codes. So basically, like you go there and say, look, I would like a function that does that. And then the tool will say, look, this is a suggestion. Do you want that one or you want different ones? So, and then it keeps that context. I think this is what is the most interesting thing, because like as Mesh was saying, like in the past we saw things like, okay, I have a specific question, it will match with possible answers, but now it just keeps the context, and that's for me was the game changer. So like you just express what you want. I want a function of X, it writes a function of X, and if you don't like it, say like I want a different alternative, and then it gives you. And then it's like I would like to generate the test for that, and it generates a test. So basically, like it's almost like you telling the machine what to do, and I found that massively impressive. But that's what I mean. Like for example, by AI aided programming is like you using uh, another source of intelligence, if you like, when you are expressing what you want and collaborating with this other source of intelligence.
Hmm. Well, I don't know if I would say intelligence in there, but but I understand. No, it's like this dialogue, no, where you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of clarifying or refining the result of what you want, no, and this thing is generating the code for you, no, in a sense. I think there's another aspect that it would help with, which is understanding code. So I think one of the and Chat GPT, for instance, does this very well, and so on, is the summarizing what things are about or explaining what things are about. So it could be relatively easy to get to a code base that maybe you don't know about, and just by looking at that summary will give you a better idea or understanding of the context, no, to which degree that is safe to do and just act on the summary of I think as time goes on it will get refined a lot more, and trustworthy, so to speak. You can rely a bit more on it. But I think that's another aspect, like getting the whole project right, and kind of asking questions, like where are the areas where this happens, and it will tell you, no, or where is there more risk for eggs, no, and it will analyze the thing and tell you, right. So I think that's also another aspect that could be quite interesting, not just designing or telling it to write the code for you.
Um, I again, I find it very exciting. I think it's been a very long time since I looked at something and I thought, wow, this is gonna change things, right? And uh, there is a book called Life 3.0, which talks about because you said, oh, I wouldn't call it intelligence. I actually would call it artificial intelligence, but there is a distinction between artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, so AI and AGI, right? Even at like when I studied AI at university, they would they were looking at AI and not AGI, and even a knowledge based system that allowed you to answer questions, this person has these symptoms, what could they have in terms of an illness or a condition, and things
Mhm.
like Prolog. We were programming in Prolog to create these decision systems, right? And that is AI, right? It's intelligence. You can rely on it. It's a tool. And I think this is, and even the way I would see it is that we look at IntelliJ or the JetBrains IDE, right? and
Mhm.
we and Code Insight got really much better, and they called it Code Insight, right? You start typing and it will complete the kind of the signature definition for you, or you type for and it will do the skeleton for the for loop, right? Now I don't see this as any different, except like maybe a thousand times more powerful. But it is just like that is was a tool that actually really helped us. IDs do help you, especially with more cumbersome kind of verbose languages, they help you create all code that you don't have to type. You can move quicker. And I think this is just a leap in that direction. It helps you move much quicker. And it is intelligence, in my view. I think it will really make programmers very productive if they use it well.
Yeah, so it's funny, Mesh, because you said what I would say in terms of like I'm not a true geek, right? So though I'm a developer and I like technology, but I'm not a geek. So for example, I very rarely the early adopter of something and stuff. So very rarely I get excited with stuff. I normally wait for certain things to mature, others to die because they come in, make a lot of noise and die. And so then I didn't even waste my time. But this is something that like similar to you, Mesh, like when I looked at it and I said like this is a game changer. This will completely revolutionize everything. Even like to the point like my daughter goes to a private school here, and there was a I think 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I think about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So there was an assembly where all the parents go and stuff, and the head teacher of the school was talking to parents about GBT, and she was saying that they will need to learn how to deal with that because, of course, that the students might start using that for their assignments and things like that. So this is going to disrupt tons of industries. Like not like our area is just one out of many, but lawyers, for example, or many other people that write documents or rely on research and stuff like that. Like this is gone. Like so, for example, I saw. I think that it was Muhammad Sufyan. So he was saying that he's now using that instead of Stack Overflow. So this is so powerful that will tip the scale of very large and established organizations. Stack Overflow probably will be gone. Even
Mm.
Google, to some degree, depending on what you are using Google for, might go away as well. So this is a significant disruptive technology, right? So yeah, and in terms of the software developers, we will evolve to a position that we will be more telling what we want done. Like that's how I see the future. We'll be more like I think that like this is like very new, right? Remember that this was
Specification by example. You use
yeah.
specification by example, but in this dialogue format, no?
Right, exactly. So because like if you think about this is quite new. Like this was released what in November last year or something like that. So
Mhm.
imagine like in 5 years time where this is going to be. You know.
So one thing I would say about this is that like people often take it to, and I've seen a few videos as well where people said, well, it can go all the way to where we don't need programming languages. Or I personally don't think so, because I'll tell you one problem with this code generation in general when it's a black box, right? Again, back to my AI course at university, one thing that we always knew about neural nets is that when you were training them, uh, once they managed to do what you were going to do, good luck in actually understanding how they're doing it.
What exactly? Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
explainability issue
the
of
explainability issue is big, right? And you can probably take technologies like this all the way to where you are just saying things and it's creating all the code for you. They're talking about even taking the middle man away, which is programming languages, and creating machine code directly, right? And it could probably do that, if given enough, right? So where you're just telling it what to do, what kind of features you want, how you want it to look, blah blah blah, what behaviors, and it will start creating things. The problem I see there is that then you hit that same problem because you've got a black box, you don't know how it's doing things. And when certain things don't work, you don't know. And then maybe you have to start from scratch because you don't know how you got to where you got to. And
Mm.
actually, the current form that it's in, where it's allowing, it's interactive, it's small steps but quick. You're telling it, okay, create this function that does this, use this library for this kind of layout and so on. And you are constantly reviewing the code, you're making it better, you're improving it, you're getting it to do that. Aided, the programmer is still in charge, but the AI is doing the toil. And again, this is actually in Life 3.0 as well, is that, the conclusion in that there was that the AGI, which is basically, HAL and, all that science fiction, where AGI is basically, you know, artificial intelligence that is indistinguishable from human intelligence. Forget that. But what they talked about is where AI is going to revolutionize the world is by removing toil away from humans so that humans can do the work that only humans can do. And a lot of the time when we are programming, there is a lot of toil involved in it, right? We have in our mind exactly what that function should look like. And then it takes about us half an hour to create it and write the tests. But, but reading it, having something else generate it, and then just tweaking it to what you want would be much quicker. So I think it's removing that toil, but still keeping the interactivity, the transparency of what is creating, allowing you to refine. I think that's where it's a game changer.
The
As,
No, go on, Jose.
no, I think that there's more aspects to it. I think the dialogue aspect is quite important. In a sense, it's almost like having a pairing partner, the driver and the navigator kind of thing, no. But with someone that can write really really fast, no, and so on. So oh wait, make this change or whatever, and that expression of having to communicate what you're thinking and so on, I think will have an impact as well, right? Both in the way that we think, because we are using more natural language to express what we want to do instead of programming languages, which in a sense are trying to specialize, no, in those things. So it's we might develop our own domain specific languages to deal with this stuff is what I'm trying to say, no. And then there's the other aspect of how we learn as well, programmers, no. So before someone's saying, no, I just use this instead of the Stack Overflow, or I do no, before, like, you would go look at tutorials, you would this I think has the potential to make it very interactive, so that this pairing buddy that you have is not only writing the code, it's also kind of mentoring you or explaining things, and then you're having this conversation with them, no, at the same time. And I've seen people start to use it like that, right? Like, hey, this is how you would do this, and it goes, it explains the thing, and then you can ask questions around, well, so why is it doing this, or why, what would be the way to do X, Y, Z, and I don't understand why these two are different, no, and then you will go and explain um, why, no. So that I think is also quite powerful in itself, no, the way that we learn, the way that we think about the learning of software development and computers in general, no, and that I think that's
and I haven't tried it. I mean, I don't know how it works with, like, for example, refactoring. I'm sure it will do probably a good job in refactoring at the small scale, but even at a large scale, this could be very interesting indeed. And especially with kind of like with a test-driven approach and that kind of thing, where you're creating the tests or you are generating the test that would then verify the code, but then you're saying, okay, I have confidence in my test, re- refactor this. Or you can say, okay, I am testing it, what am I not testing, what are the key things that are not my tests are not covering. Like, we look at code coverage, but code coverage is actually very rudimentary. It requires a lot of interpretation to truly understand whether the thing that is being exercised is actually being verified. Whereas this kind of thing could actually help you do all that. And I would love to see those kind of tools coming to the fore, where they're not talking about code coverage in terms of the code that's exercised, but what are you verifying and what are the things that you're missing? Wouldn't that be brilliant in an IDE that could tell you that?
It would. I just before I answer to that, I would like to go back a bit on what you were saying, Ash. My thesis when I graduated, and that goes back to 1997. Yeah. So I remember having discussions with other people in my classroom, and they were saying that because back then it was the day that the 4GL languages were being created, like, and we have things like, for example, a lot of drag and drop tools that would create desktop applications. Like we had Visual Basic, we had Delphi, we had all this kind of stuff. Even like we had like remember rational rows and all the UML that you could draw UML and it would generate code. It was around that time. Yeah, for those of you that might be a bit as old as I am. Back then, there was already conversation that programmers would die. And then my thesis was that programmers would not die, ever, right? So then I was looking at history, and I found in books from the 70s similar arguments when COBOL was invented. So when COBOL was invented, people were saying programmers will die, because before that, people were programming in assembly, and all of a sudden, what they did, like with COBOL, they elevate the
level of abstraction.
The level of abstraction, exactly. So what was happening was every innovation in terms of programming languages and IDEs and stuff was an elevation of level of abstraction, including the frameworks and libraries and things like that, even databases, if you like, right? So all this tooling was a continuous elevation of levels of abstraction. So we code more and more to a higher level of abstraction. And every time the abstraction is elevated, and I was trying to think about that before we join here, like when those jumps, when those leaps happen, and I think there is a degree of confidence as well. For example, today this chat GPT is very new, right? So I would not dare just to ask it to create a function for me and not review it. Yeah. But that was true for the frameworks in the past. We would not just, like, for example, I would not trust this framework. I'm going to write my own thing. Until then, then you give up, because like the framework's been around for a long time. Loads of fixes were done and stuff, and then say, you know what, this library here or this framework, I can rely. I don't need to worry about that anymore. And those things, for me, this will speed up that elevation. And I would combine that intelligence, if you like, with also the building blocks that we are dealing today. For example, in the examples of the Copilot, some people are saying like, I would like to create a Node.js application that does that and call this API, and then the thing would know which URL to call, what was the JSON structure to send, and it's like, I would like now to post this something and blah, blah, blah. So the building blocks that we are dealing with are becoming more coarse-grained. Before, the building blocks were much smaller. Now the building blocks are going. So I see that, like in a few years, us doing far bigger things. For example, I saw an example of how many services do I need to build a dating application or an e-commerce application? And all of a sudden, the thing was saying, like, you need like an authentication service, you will need like a profile service, you need a matching service, you need this and this and that. It's okay, like create one service, create all those services in Node.js. And I see those things, or expose an API with this. Deploy that into a Lambda on AWS. I believe that because of the building blocks are becoming more and more mature, I see that going that direction. And I would not even go as far as saying, like, if you put augmented reality, so really start visualizing that, like, for example, because as the building blocks become more coarse-grained, it allows us to say, look, I create a service with this kind of input and output. That's the data. I want the data to be persisted in there with that format. This should be available in that server.
But I think those, I agree, by the way, the building blocks, it's definitely, I even used to, I mean, this is something I said a while back, and I still say it, is that why are we still dealing, like, especially from an infrastructure point of view, why do we end up, creating, starting from the beginning with infrastructure as code, like every single project, we are all creating most of the scripts or Terraform scripts or whatever scripts we're creating ourselves. Maybe there are some templates here and there, but why is it? Why don't we have a high level of abstraction? Because actually, in platform, there's a finite things, a number of things that you do, right? Whereas in programming, the business logic and so on, there's variations for every single thing that you see. But at the platform level, that's not true. You have a very finite number of variations. So why don't we have a larger building blocks in platform? But this allows you to create that. One thing I would say is that I don't think, or I think it's quite far away for us to have that level of confidence on, um, write me a service that does this thing with these variations, because as we said, like every business, although, depending on how far down to the microservices you go, there might be some microservices like authentication and so on, these cross-cutting things which would always be very similar or the same, but others would be quite different. Like it almost reminds me of the worldly map and that kind of thing, commodity and custom. And I think with commodity you can have larger building blocks, with custom you can't. And AI technology is constantly learning, so it's constantly evolving what it will create. So I don't think you can. It's not a case of like, here's one thing and then we'll gradually work out the kinks or the problem. It's like it's going to be generating and evolving whatever is creating. Next time it will be different and so on. So I think we still will
And they'll
need
be
to.
creating new problems as well.
Exactly.
So,
So
so
I
even if
think
you
we.
take care of the gig, then yeah.
Yes, totally. So I think you'll still need to provide that scrutiny, that, but in some cases, yes, where you got commodity, uh, in services, you'll be able to create a much
but
larger building
but there's
blocks.
an aspect of this which I think is quite groundbreaking. I remember a couple of years back watching a talk by Uncle Bob, and he was saying something along the lines of, we're, this was, I'm paraphrasing, yeah, but it was something along the lines of, we're kind of stuck in software development. No, like we haven't. There's been a bunch of years already where we haven't made
I
any
remember. I know
progress or
this
something
story.
like that. This is what I would envision, like, hey, I want to split this thing, and like, and that is now possible because you have a means that sort of can map that understanding of the language, no, to what
Programming.
splitting a service is, or or
Mm.
this or that. And then that, I think, is groundbreaking in the sense that you can think of your system as a whole and describe it in regular language, no, and ask it to do things, and with high impact as well, right? Because before you were saying how many services do I need? 10. Okay, so write 10 services, and I'm not saying that it's gonna be good or bad or whatever. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility, and you can make big mistakes if you can. No, it's the same like running scripts or whatever other tool you want to use, no. But that ability to think of your system and make operations on it, yeah, just describing your describing with natural language, no, is, I
Yeah,
think, quite groundbreaking. Before it was like you need some kind of means, right? Like you needed a way to describe the rules, whether it's UML, precondition, postcondition, the design by contract, like this kind of thing to do it. Now you can just express it and refine it, and I think that's groundbreaking in that sense, right?
yeah,
It will be, you will be thinking of, oh, look at this, you before you were thinking BR and all this stuff. Like, why not? You have a representation of your system. Hey, I would like, you don't have to do it, right? Like it would be more like Tony Stark talking to the, well, I don't remember the name of the
I
of
know
the
what you mean.
AI that he has. Yeah, but it's like you're talking to it, it's like, oh, what if we do this? What if we do that? And then it's just like, you don't have to interact with it. You don't need to physically do it. But before, someone was saying in the chat that you're kind of the more AI you use, you're kind of unlearning the programming that you know. And I think this is it is a valid concern, because of course you can do things without knowing what is happening, but you can do that today as well, right?
Exactly.
Like it's a problem that is present independently of
This is
whether
the
you're
point
using
that
AI.
this is the point that I was making before, because like that argument was made multiple times. Like it's not that we are unlearning. I don't think that you unlearn, right? And I'm pretty sure that it was Replicant, I think, that wrote that. So I don't think that he meant like, if I'm misrepresenting you, Replicant, just let me know. But like, I don't think that he meant like unlearn. It's basically probably we are not gonna learn deep enough certain things that are happening behind the scene. But this has been true for today. For example, if you take a developer today and you go back to the guys that were working in assembly, right? So in the old days, they would say that we don't know anything because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And so, as I was saying about the levels of abstraction, so what we do is not that we unlearn skills, we gain new skills. Because the complexity of the software, the thesis when I wrote that in the university, is that if the developer was only doing, let's say, I'm mostly a Java developer, right? So, and I haven't been coding professionally for a while now, in a proper project. So, for example, my skills are becoming obsolete gradually. So if I'm stuck in that, if my definition of a developer is being a Java developer, doing the traditional web app applications that we used to do in the past, I will die as a developer. But if I evolve to use modern applications nowadays, using like serverless architecture and all the new technologies that we have out there, then I elevate my knowledge to the current status quo, if you like. So this is what I'm saying. I think that as what I was saying, my thesis is that the type of problems become bigger. The building blocks become bigger, but the type of problems become bigger. Because, for example, when I was at that time, the first projects that I had when I went to the industry was to automate a point of sale for a bakery or for a shop in the corner, and when they had a network of shops, so they had to have physical disks that we would copy and take somewhere else to put in a server. So the nature of our applications, they were much simpler then. As the building blocks and technology evolved, the complexity of those systems became much larger. Today we buy that system. We don't build a system like we used to build in the 90s. We just buy them off the shelf as a SaaS today.
And you don't need to know the specifics. Like
Exactly.
all of us are using computers now. Do we know exactly how the logic processor is mapped out and what like? No, because we don't need to, right? Like we have some general understanding of what that could look like, and not even, because lots of people use computers that don't have that knowledge, right? So it really, I think it's trying to make the argument that you would need to know every single layer of abstraction to the higher
I don't
level
need to
detail
know how
to
AWS what AWS does to have a Lambda available. I just need to be able to put some
I
code
need
in
to
there.
exactly.
I think you need to look at time horizons. I totally agree, time horizons, because I think in the long term, yes, I agree with you that we will come to a point where the level at which we're programming is much bigger, much different. The problems are much higher, and so on. There is one thing I would say, however, is that right now, for example, I was teaching. I'm doing this. Shameless plug. I'm doing this course for the Madrid software craftsmanship community, like some talks on how to program in Clojure. And in the first two lessons, I did not go to an IDE at all, because I wanted to show them the language and how it works and the certain tools that work. And I love my IDEs. I use them all the time. But I think that the IDEs actually bred a certain kind of developer who they were often like junior developers that were born in the IDEs and didn't understand, like for example Java, they didn't understand what a class path was or how it worked and certain things. And that's what I mean by time horizon. Even with the chat GPT, right, you might start getting the type of developer who relies on it so much that they can't they 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 don't really know what it's creating, or to artificial level they do, but they can't create it themselves, right? And I think that is dangerous. But on the other hand, people who understand it and are using it as a tool to remove the toil, they will understand more. So I
They'll
don't
be
think
able
it's
to do more as well. This is the
exactly. And
other
so
thing, because they'll be
so
able to do it faster as well. No,
faster,
so
and you'd be reading code and you'd be coming across novel code much more often. So actually, arguably, it can make you a better programmer. You will understand more approaches on how certain things are done, as long as you pay attention to those things are done. So I think in at least in the next, I don't know, 5 years or whatever we want to call it, the next time horizon, I think it's just a really good tool that will make people better programmers. I don't think they will get to the point where it's already removing the need for them to understand, the code at the level that they need to understand right now.
No, but I think that what you will be able to do um, in 5 years' time is way more than just like, oh, create me a Roman numeral function and write the tests for it, right? So as we could see in some of those examples, people are already creating applications that you can just copy and paste and they run. They are simple applications. There are Node.js applications or Python applications. Like it will be a bit difficult for you to say like, I want to create a microservices in Java and whatever else. But the technology, what we would say, like, why we would even use Java anyway for certain things, like depending on which technology stack you go for, and if you go for serverless and all this kind of stuff, you probably would like to have something much simpler that could be easily generated and deployed by simple tools. The I feel that I'm really excited with this. Like, I never thought that I would be saying this, by the way, but like I think that we will be more on the specification side, because you can even write the test, but not write the test. I mean, like you can specify what the test should do. So, for example, you could say create a set of tests or test that service with those kind of inputs and outputs, or given those inputs, I would expect that service to return this or to store this thing in a database. So you start describing, like as you mentioned, Jose, the specification by example. I don't know how that would be. Well, that could be easily recorded and stored somewhere, and then added to the continuous integration or the pipelines and so on. But I believe that you could ask that to be generated.
and there's a
Yeah.
difference with the specification by example, which is instead of just having, oh, this is the example, this is how I is additive, because the way that this works is that you're having a conversation and you're kind of refining
Yeah.
the specification as you're going, right?
And
Like it's
it
not
could
like, oh,
create
this it, no,
it could
you,
create
you
that
can.
specification for you as well. In fact, someone asked that question exactly. They said, would you then have it write tests, and how would you trust those tests if you're not trusting the code? But actually, you would scrutinize the tests, and you have it understand. You know exactly what kind of rules it's creating, and you can even get it to explain and summarize those rules as specification by example, even as formal specification. Again, this is like an old technology maybe, or old paradigm that may come back, where you had formal specification that actually could be mathematically proven for certain kind of things. So you could have this create certain self-validating specifications that are better read or easily read if you know the domain, and they can, as you said, Sandro, you can have certain things that are persisting, that are not evolving, or they are additive, they're not being removed, and that are actually constantly helping you verify what's being generated. So actually, the most important thing that then remains in your code base is the other rules that you've kind of built
Yeah.
as you are generating or building the code base.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw some examples like playing with APIs, right? They say like, okay, I would like to get the, I don't know, the state of these, uh, the value of these thing on the stock market and so on and so forth. So the thing already knew which URL to point to, and then it's like I would like to list all those different companies in the stock market and the information and stuff. Then it consumed the API. It already created the data structure. It understood the API that it was calling, and then it started putting on some data and spitting out in the console and stuff like that. So you can interacting with the thing. You can select create an. I would like to get a service, and API should be X. I would like to have like to receive get requests of, with this format, or I should be able to accept post requests with this. That is this, and then you keep playing with that. No, add this field, remove that field, and so on and so forth. So you're just telling the thing what to do, and then you say, look, for this API in here with this input, I would like this kind of data to appear somewhere else. And I think that, like, for example, at some point, the thing will be intelligent enough that given those input and output definitions, it should figure out how to get there, as long as it's not something massively complicated. I cannot see that creating machine learning, something very deeply complicated. But like most of the APIs, like they receive data, they validate some shit, store it somewhere, or they go to somewhere, get some data, join it, filter or whatever, and return. So those things are not very complicated.
Exactly. And someone asked a question. I think it's Mohammed Sufyan. He asked a question. What about that question around it's using other people's code that is proprietary to learn, right? And my answer to that is this exactly: the vast majority of code is not rocket science. It's just the same way of doing the same thing. It's like there's a bit of data processing, there's a bit of persistence, there's a bit of translation, a few. It's not, a lot of the times you're not asking your GitHub Copilot to write the complex business logic that is proprietary to a particular business. The custom aspect, it's creating commodity for you, not custom. And when it's looking at it, by definition, the things that it's really going to learn and heavily biased towards are commodity, because it will see the same way of doing things over and over again, and those are the things that it's going to be building their models over. So I personally think this is actually a very good thing. I know that like there's privacy issues and reading people's repositories and this and that and so on, but I think this is for the good. I think people, most of the time people are complaining. If you got some piece of code in a public repo, the chances are, and I would say 99%, I'm just making percentages up, code that's written is not exactly your secret sauce, right? And the secret sauce type of code is very few and far between, and by definition is not the best bits to train a general coding algorithm from. So I think the people who complain about it are kind of going a bit too far down the being
there's been cases where it would spit out training data like keys, like API keys and stuff like that.
Yeah, but if your API keys are sitting in your
yeah, exactly.
Right.
in your
Right.
public repos, then you deserve it.
Now, like I have a very small anecdote about this code privacy. This was way before, like this goes back probably 10 years ago, because we didn't have Codurance. I was still working for UBS with Mesh. And back then we were discussing if you could work from home or not, and if you could access the network, the UBS network, from home or not. So that was a discussion, and because we wanted laptops and all this kind of stuff. And then I remember having this discussion with one of the main architects in there. No, because you cannot do that, because what if people get our code, they get their hands on our code? And I said, dude, if someone can get this code, understand and make sense of it. I've been working here for almost 3 years and I still don't understand. So we should hire those guys, you know. So
No, but listen, with an AI, that would be possible in a relatively small amount of time.
yeah. But see, this is what
Yeah.
Master was saying. Like, it's not the code base. Like, of course, there might be some very specific things that are really like where the code base is, their product is so special that it will make a difference. But most of the time, like, what is difficult is to generate a business, is to find clients, is to have someone to buy your stuff or to sell your stuff or to make a company run and stuff. Like, the code itself is just a means to an end. Is not what it. The source code is not. For example, if someone gets the source code, for example, if I get the source code from one of those from Netflix, right? I have the entire, let's say, the entire Netflix or Spotify or even Facebook on my computer right now. I cannot create another Netflix. I will never get those clients or make those contracts and sign those deals. So I think that people think too much about sometimes of their source code, unless
No,
that is something that very major
yeah,
that they
like
do.
cutting edge, and
Yeah,
it's
some
like,
cutting edge
Unpatented.
research and development, and
Yeah,
yeah,
you
exactly.
haven't created a pattern for it or whatever. Yeah. So there's another thing which is, and this is something that IBM has been doing, because Watson is quite older than all of this stuff, and Watson was already kicking ass some time ago. Though I think one of the things that made this explode was the fact that they kind of open it to the world. No, that's one of them. The other one is, I don't know the specific of Watson, but is the massive size that this thing has, like all the parameters that it has, like a billion or whatever it is. No, so I think the fact, the combination of the size and what it's able to do, yeah, that model that is mapped in there, what it's able to do, and the fact that anyone can use it, were two of the things that kind of blew it out of proportion. But it is something that, again, IBM had been doing already for quite some time. Yeah, and the way that they go, they went around some of this stuff. I remember when the whole, for instance, predicting if someone's going to vote one way or another, or whatever, based on the data, this kind of stuff, right? It's like, oh, this is illegal, or whatever. Well, I'm not using the data itself. I'm using a model that I created from the data, right? So even if I'm using your code to train my thing, what I'm actually commercializing, what I'm using is the aggregation, not just of your code, of all the other shit that I put into that, right?
Mhm.
So that separation between what it is that the model is and how it derives stuff from whatever data you use to train it, is something that people miss out on. Which brings us to the topic of the whole bias thing, like using training sets that
So,
basically
Jose,
get you.
before you go to the bias, I've just remembered something, and I think it adds to that argument, or rather, um, provides another perspective, right? So, we're talking about just code, and it's fine. Yeah, there is a big hoo-ha going on at the moment in AI algorithms that are creating art, right?
Mhm.
So they are taking original creations, yeah, millions of them or whatever, and then you can say, do me an impressionist painting of these fruits in a Tuscan landscape or something, right?
Wasn't it the
Or
previous version how this open AI actually came about? Was the project before the Chat
No,
GPT?
is that DALI and, yeah? So this is
Yes.
Dali.
Stable Diffusion, DALI, and Midjourney are three models that
So
do that
so
kind of stuff. But it's a different
so
kind
it's
of.
like there's a lot of digital artists that have, so they have their projects, they, of course they need to sell, and they have all this electronically available, but they are copyrighted. These things, code of, you can argue, but they are copyrighted. And then it will create a new painting, learn taking all those other paintings, and it will create a new painting. Now, the reason I add it personally, like I had this conversation with my son, who is doing a degree in computer science, but who's also into art and so on. And he's very vocal, like, this is stealing. Like people are, because he's also into artists and he knows some artists who've had, and I said to him, like, same thing. I said, no, it's not stealing, it's learning. Like, does that new painting look like the painting? No, but it's taking away. His view was that these painters or artists or graphic designers, they're spending a hell of a lot of time building something. They've honed this art over their whole
The
lives.
skill.
They skill over their whole lives, and suddenly something can create something as good as theirs or even better.
It's stealing your
Without,
skills, right? Like
yeah,
all
still,
those years
but
of
they so
experience.
like we developers feel threatened. I mean, talk about them. They're basically losing their livelihood. It's like, oh, I want to use that painting, but actually, no, because that's copyrighted and the guy wants like 500 pounds for it for me to use it on my website. You know what? I'm gonna feed that into AI and say, like, do me a similar painting like this, and suddenly I'm not gonna buy
And just
that
make
painting.
those changes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
I'm not
instead
gonna
of
buy
that, I
that
want
painting.
something
I'm just
else.
gonna create my own original. Now, where do we stop? I'm just asking the devil's advocate, because I was like
Right.
more on the lines of,
Well, but this is probably will lead to a separate discussion. It's probably not the right channel and not the right time. But this happened throughout the history. For me, this has also happened with Industrial Revolution. So as things evolve, the value that are associated to things change, right? So what people are interested to buy or pay more or less change according to the demand, supply, the whole economics and stuff. So, for example, before, in order to have a nice painting on your wall, there was no internet, there was no printer machines. You had to go to a proper painter and say, look, this guy or this person will spend days.
yeah, paint me a portrait of my family.
Exactly, and you would be there. Like he would spend days, and you would spend days there, right?
You,
So,
you, you know, I agree, and I think but there is a social impact to this stuff, right? Like just with like you described with painters, I don't think the painters or people with those skills would disappear. There'll be less of them, yeah, because there's less demand, therefore less, uh, less my brain today, less money basically to sustain that kind of business, yeah. But there will still be people who would want their paintings to be done by a professional, no, in a specific style, with
In
the
paint shop, in
brush and
Photoshop
the
or whatever,
or
or,
whatever, yeah, exactly. So
Illustrator,
that's
yeah,
still going to be there. It will become most likely
a
a
craft,
niche. No, it
yeah,
is a craft
an
already, but
art. It'll
it's
become
like
an
a
art form,
niche.
yeah.
No, no. So what is done is commoditize a lot those. Let's say the output of that kind of thing, right? But the the thing that is being built, although it uses the same style or the same, colors or whatever, right? Similar, yeah. It's not exactly what you created. Yeah, it's not your work. So generating something and saying no, it's stealing because it copied the way that I do things. If I go and start copying someone's style, I copy someone's style. I think the main problem with this is the social impact that it's having, because it is reducing, the livelihood of these people, and that has an impact. Yeah,
Mhm.
if people were able to create the paintings using whatever style but not profit from it, I think would be less of a problem in that sense,
yeah,
because
but
check
society
the status
reinvents.
quo of
Yeah,
the of
but
the
society reinvents themselves because, like, this was said. Like, for example, this exact argument happened so many times, but so many times, mainly within our industry. Our industry is notorious to destroy other jobs. Remember well. Remember well.
Yeah, we are doing the
We are
automation
this.
by
We are
definition.
this.
Well, so technology in general, like from industrial revolution to now, like for some, remember like when Uber came about, the riots that we had all over the world in large big cities, and say like, oh no, taxi drivers are dead, or this kind of industry is dead, or
They're
then we
still going
had
on in
like
Spain, by the way, the
exactly in
riots.
Spain they still like that. Now it's just a sport. I think became a national sport. But but like every now and again, like that we created a new product, or a new technology emerged. So, oh, now these people will not have jobs. It happened all over the place. And then we automated some supermarkets. Then we don't need someone to be scanning our stuff, because some supermarkets you do that uh, without. So we do that all the time throughout our history, and we'll keep doing that. And society keeps reinventing themselves. Like I was, for example, there are many jobs. If you take the last 20 years, there are many jobs that didn't exist in 20 years. Although some of them are now not popular, or you would not make money out of them. But there is a whole new industry, a whole set of new jobs that were created because the internet, or YouTube, or Spotify, or Netflix, or Uber, or so you see what I'm saying. So for me, like these arguments will never die, and I think that society will always reinvent themselves. New jobs will emerge. We'll be doing different things, but
It's an
that's
evolution, basically.
exactly.
But again, it does have a social impact. We have the other topic that I was trying to bring in, which was the whole. Um, what was
Are you
it?
sure you don't want to wait for another couple of minutes?
Exactly. I think that like you need to wait for a couple of minutes.
No,
Like
no,
normally around
we have time
58
to
minutes,
finish.
2 minutes to the hour. That's normally
Yeah.
when you were saying, okay, shall we start wrapping up? So no.
No, no, it's the whole bias, no, introduced by the training data and this kind of stuff, which is kind of related to what we were discussing. Now, like I'm giving you my data and whatever, right? And there were at the beginning there were a few examples with ChatGPT where people would, you know, write a function that tells you if a programmer is good or not, right? And then the function would be like, oh, if the programmer is white, no, or if it's a woman, no, or whatever, right? And there was bias built into the thing, no, from
There,
the
there,
data.
there is, but I'd like to say one thing. It's like the same with self-driving cars, yeah? Right? Human beings kill other people when they're driving on a daily basis, probably thousands and thousands of times. And a self-driving car does it once, and it's news across the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and the same goes for the bias things. These things are a product of us, and they will
Well,
have they will
they
reflect.
will have flaws, same
Yeah,
as us.
they will reflect us, right? So if we have biases, they will have biases, right? But they will probably have, I mean, other than what was that Twitter bot that was it created by Twitter that started spewing racist uh, profanities everywhere? But the thing is, I think we do need to monitor it and so on. But they will have biases, right? As we all do, and they will learn from the information that's out there, and all those biases will be embodied within the model, right?
It will be a bit of a mirror, right? Like it is showing us what we
What
are
we are,
kind of,
what we are,
it's like
and
if you want better results, then start getting,
and
Yeah.
sometimes
start,
it's good to look at a mirror, because then you can kind of realize that your hairline is
But
receding.
but but like again, like this is a topic that is way beyond my understanding. But I wonder, because like when we talk about bias and stuff, quite often it's because people take their own point, their own perspective of the world, or their group perspective, and then everything that they talk and reason about is from that perspective. But as we have multiple groups from completely different perspectives, or groups or individuals with completely different perspectives, publishing stuff, talking about the same topics, but from completely different views, I wonder if those machines would be a little bit less biased, because they might be trained across data
They'll have
that
more
comes,
perspective than
they
individual
will have more
humans do.
perspectives. Exactly. And the machine
Possible.
probably would not care too much. It might still favor one over the other, but I don't think that it will. I don't know exactly. This is where my knowledge is very limited in this area. So I don't know exactly how it learns, or if it would favor something that finds more occurrences of something or not. So, for example, maybe there is one type of group that is more vocal about a perspective, and so on. But in a way, these kind of stuff, if done like more like, okay, this is a bunch of text that you need to analyze, might be far less biased than we are today.
It's an interesting proposition.
Yeah, the out doesn't mean that it will probably will come up with a outcome after it analyzes that depend of your own biases. You might not like that outcome because it might go against your own perspective. But in theory, my view could be less biased than we are now.
Yeah, totally. All right, I think we are hitting the hour mark. Should
The
we?
1 hour mark. Yeah,
Yes.
let's wrap it up. So, any final thoughts on the topic that you would like to share?
I can start. I think, how will AI change software development? I think ChatGPT is probably and the Copilot and so on. They are exciting. They're the first time after quite a long career in software development, I see something. I think, okay, this is moving us forward. This will move us forward, and I really hope that it does. I think it will change software development. It'll make people more productive. Hopefully, it will make software more reliable as well. And as Sandro, you were saying, as things become faster and we become more productive, it will allow us to do bigger things with software. I think it will lift the programmer hopefully into newer abstractions and make even our job exciting. And I think I'm for once very hopeful that this technology will change our industry for the better.
Yeah, same, very similar for me. And I just realized that I was replying. Okay, let me reply now properly. So I think that I'm excited about it. I agree with Mesh. I think that it's going to change significantly. I don't remember seeing anything so disruptive like that. I think this is a game changer, not only in our industry but in many other industries. I think that all of us, for example, if you played like with it once, you want to play that more, right? So you want to incorporate that to your day-to-day work, right? So I think that it's a natural step in terms of, it's just a very large step compared to all the other ones, but I think that developers will keep evolving. My view for the future is that developers will work with much larger building blocks, and they will have an aid. They will be moving towards an era of intelligence and not information. I think that's what they call. I think we'll be more like, I would like to do that, or what would be the best way to do that. So we will be using our brain to solve problems, or understand what problems we should solve, learning the right questions, and so like, what if we did that? What would be the approach for that? What would be the best way to resolve that? How can I connect to that? So you start telling what the machine what to do, instead of us having to do the almost the monkey word, like typing on the keyboard.
The toil.
Exactly. So I think that's a game changer in my view.
I second that. No, it is a game changer. I'm looking forward to see how this not only evolves but how available it gets made. I think that there's some aspects of control over the technology itself and what advantage that gives. I think this is one of the things that, for instance, I was talking about IBM before and Watson. There is an aspect of making it available and allowing things not to stagnate, no, and continue
Yeah.
evolving and innovating. And I think I'm looking forward to see what happens out of that. There's already plenty of innovation on top of the API. Like thousands of businesses have started already on this, no, but if we want to accelerate that, I think it needs to be
I think it needs to
it
be
needs
the
to go
bazaar
beyond.
and not the cathedral.
Exactly, right. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, especially with Microsoft behind it. I think it's good that there will be other players and other people, like other similar models or systems being made available and so on. And looking forward to that and what can come out of that. I think that overall the evolution, as you said, Sandro, of software development and developers in general will change in the way that we interact with building those systems and what kind of reach we have, but also the types of skills and knowledge that we will require. Uh, in particular, AI. So if you haven't looked into machine learning or how ChatGPT works behind the scenes and this kind of stuff, I would very much recommend you to do so, at least as a general understanding of what is happening, what's the magic, no, so that you don't find yourself like that Arthur C. Clarke quote, no, the any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, no.
Mhm.
It seems magic because we can't understand. So why don't no? Let's do that. And I think there'll be more of that, right? Which is not. Let's say once you before you were saying mash, no, back in my years in the university, same with same with me, no, like how much machine learning or AI general purpose or not, right? Like even the specific algorithm and things have you touched on for everyday business development? Not a
Mhm.
lot,
Yeah,
right? Not a lot.
not a lot.
So I think that will become more prevalent in day to day, and at least the understanding of how those things work, so that you can use them more effectively. And that's where I would start. No, if you're worried about machines supplanting you as a developer, maybe that's a good place to start. Okay. Okay, closing then, and thanks everyone for your time and for all the good questions and insights that you've shared with us. Remember, if this is the first time or not, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Follow us, etc. And you can find us every Tuesday from now on this year. This is the first fireside chat of the year. Woohoo! After a long break that we needed. So, looking forward to seeing you all in the next episode. And see you later.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.